Don't. That's forbidden. The words echoed in the rancher's mind long after they were spoken, clinging to him like dust on his boots as he stood alone beneath the burning western sky, the kind of sky that saw everything yet judged nothing, and still he knew some lines were never meant to be crossed. Especially not by a man like him, a man raised on rules older than the land itself, rules carved into bone and blood by generations, who believed survival depended on restraint. Yet temptation has a voice sharper than hunger and quieter than guilt, and when the rancher first heard it, it sounded like curiosity, harmless and fleeting, the way danger always introduces itself before it takes everything. He had lived his life in predictable rhythms: sunrise, cattle, repairs, sunset, silence, and the silence had become both his refuge and his prison, a place where thoughts grew louder the longer he stayed alone, and when the stranger arrived at the edge of his property, wounded and desperate, he offered help without question, because that was the code, because that was who he believed he was. She warned him then, her eyes steady despite the pain, her voice calm but absolute, telling him not to look, not to ask, not to open the door that curiosity was already pushing against, and he promised he wouldn't. Believing the promise was enough. Believing willpower was stronger than wonder. Days passed, and the rancher tended his cattle while the stranger healed. And the house that had once echoed only with wind now carried another presence, another heartbeat, another mystery, and with each passing hour the forbidden grew heavier. Not as a command but as a challenge, because humans are wired to test fences, especially when they are told they exist for their own good. At night the rancher lay awake listening to the old house creak, imagining stories to fill the gaps where answers should have been, telling himself that knowing would not change anything, that looking would not harm anyone, that understanding was not the same as betrayal, and these were the lies that softened the ground beneath his feet until the line between right and wrong blurred into a single step forward. When the moment came, it did not arrive with thunder or drama, but with quiet inevitability, a simple decision wrapped in rational thought. And as he looked, really looked, he realized too late that some truths are not meant to be witnessed, not because they are ugly, but because they demand a response, and once seen they cannot be unseen. The rancher felt the weight of the unthinkable settle into his chest, a pressure that stole his breath and rewrote his understanding of duty, because now he knew something that bound him to a choice that would define the rest of his life, a choice between turning away and pretending innocence, or acting in a way that would break every rule he had ever followed. The land remained silent, the sky unchanged, the cattle unaware, but the man was no longer the same, and as he stood there, heart racing, conscience screaming, he understood that the forbidden was never about curiosity, it was about consequence, and whatever he chose next would echo far beyond the ranch, beyond himself. The unthinkable is rarely a single act. It is a chain reaction that begins with a moment and ends with a transformation. And as the rancher stepped forward into the aftermath of what he had seen, he knew there was no version of the future where he returned to the man he had been, because knowledge carries responsibility, and responsibility demands sacrifice. He tried first to reason his way out, to convince himself that doing nothing was a choice in itself, that staying silent preserved peace. But silence began to feel like complicity, and the land he loved, the land that had raised him, seemed to watch with quiet expectation, as if asking whether he truly believed in the values he claimed to live by. The stranger's warning replayed in his mind, not as anger, but as sadness, as if she had known all along that curiosity would win, that humans rarely listen until it is too late. And when he finally spoke, finally admitted what he knew, the air between them shifted, heavy with fear and resolve, because truth has a way of stripping people down to their core. What followed was not violence, not cruelty, but courage of a different kind, the courage to act when every instinct says to retreat, to protect when it would be easier to abandon, to stand against forces far larger than oneself, even when the cost is reputation, safety, and the fragile peace of a simple life. The rancher did what no one expected him to do, including himself, stepping into a role he had never asked for, defying unwritten laws to uphold a deeper justice. And in doing so, he lost something he could never replace: the comfort of ignorance. The consequences came swiftly, as they always do. But so did something else, purpose, and for the first time in years, the rancher felt the silence of the land shift from loneliness to resolve, as if the earth itself recognized the weight of his decision. When the dust finally settled, when the danger passed and the horizon returned to stillness, He stood once more beneath the open sky, changed but unbroken, knowing that the unthinkable had not destroyed him but revealed him, and that sometimes crossing a forbidden line is not an act of weakness, but a test of who we truly are when no one is watching. His story would never be told in full, not by history books or legends, but it would live on in quiet ways, in the lives protected, the wrongs challenged, and the knowledge that doing the right thing often means standing alone.